Hi, this is Pete Ekman with the RoboZone podcast. We are in, believe it or not, we're in Reefscape Competition Week 2. Like the weekend's coming. Starts tomorrow, in fact. And with me, let's get some introductions. Henry, please introduce yourself.
All right, my name is Henry Francis. I'm a senior on Team 3414 HackBots. I'm actually the captain and driver this year. We actually just finished up our first competition this past weekend. Really excited for what we've got to come. But yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Okay, so we're going to just go right into it, right? I am very interested in what you're going to say, Henry, because my team, and I'm the drive coach, we start competing tomorrow. So as a drive coach, you try to do as much research as possible, watch matches, watch like 6 hours of matches straight on multiple TVs, iPad here, big TV, watching all the events like Battle Creek and Ferndale and all that stuff. So let's talk about how your experience at your first comp. So what comp were you guys at?
We were at Ferndale this
Okay.
past weekend, which a lot of people are calling the hardest week one of the season, which I kind of agree with, but I
Okay.
can definitely see merit to all the other competitions, so I don't want to be a little overzealous on that. But that was a really fun week one competition, definitely tougher, um, but we really enjoyed, being there. We made it to the finals as the number six alliance, which
Okay.
no one expected. Um, but yeah, that's the event we were at. Super happy about the results.
Okay. So I want to echo what you said. We're not going to say Ferndale's better than anyone else, because there was some really good competition right here at Battle Creek. I live like
Okay.
5 miles from the school. We did not go there. The AlphaBots took that one with Zoobotics and the Red Hot Chili Bots, all local teams right around me. So that's kind of cool. Um, but let's talk about what happened at Ferndale, okay? So you guys said you guys went to the finals. Unfortunately, you didn't take home the blue banner, but you got some medals, you got some hardware, right? Congratulations on that. Who was with your alliance, Henry?
Yeah, so we were alliance with 5436, I believe, Cybercats, and then it's tip of my tongue. It's Canine Robotics, and I think they're 8280. Yeah,
Yep. I'll
sounds
put it
about
in the
right.
show notes so we'll get that all the links correct so we don't have to worry about that stuff. So Henry, as a driver, as a captain, you can provide multiple viewpoints on this. So it's kind of like having three of you on the same podcast. So I don't have to ask the other questions to the other people. You're like the subject matter expert, okay, coming out of week one and being a driver. So tell me your first match, okay? Was it was it harder than you thought it was going to be? The game, driving around. Give us a little bit of perspective of that first match when you're on an actual um, game field. Tell us how that felt.
Yeah, I mean that first match, I would honestly even stretch it to that first practice match. Um, that's the most frantic time you'll ever have in a season, which I mean, of course you're going to be experienced with, but especially like if you're a rookie team or if this is a brand new drive team you're running with, it is just jarring how frantic that match is going to be for you. I know we were trying to run a lot of vision and automatic placements of coral, and we couldn't get anything to work in that first one. And, the trial and error that you have to do so rapidly, that is what makes these matches so difficult to compete in. It also is what makes it so much fun. Uh, but yeah, no, I would say that first match, it was definitely a lot more difficult than you think going into it because when you're practicing at a home facility, you can get nice and close to that reef in the middle and really make sure you're lined up, everything's dialed in. Once you're, 10, 15 feet away, you're doing it at an angle, it's all completely different. So that's the number one thing I noticed for sure.
Okay. So we built, I'm sure in your practice facility, you built the practice reef, right? Which is basically cardboard and either PVC, but if you're lucky enough to have some manufacturing resources, you could do metal piping, right? So how about the lining up to, putting the coral on as the driver? Was it a huge difference between the game field and what we saw in our practice pieces when we built them?
I would say it's almost the exact same. And we were really lucky at our high school. We don't actually have a full field, but we do have the ability to make the PVC model as well as actually purchase the game element
Okay.
reef structure. So that was really nice for us because we actually got to make sure that our testing worked the same. The biggest difference we noticed is if you're trying to place on L1, that hard, almost polycarbonate type of base that the actual game uses is a lot more bouncy than
Oh,
the wood you're using in your shop. So a lot of people were struggling a ton with L1 placements, which got really interesting when it came to ranking points. It was super uncommon to see an alliance get all 6 ranking points at Ferndale, even with, we had Killer Bees, RoboJack. It's like we had the high level teams to do it. It was just really, really difficult for that reason.
I know that one of the things that really caught my eye as a drive coach, and I was just watching the first video, right? So it's just from the side. But what I was looking at is watching um, drive teams react to having the barge right in the middle of the field. So tell us a little bit about that. I've heard the sight lines are horrible, especially if you're driving on the other side as a defensive bot, right? So what did you think about that piece?
Yeah, so the barge is really interesting to me because I've heard the sightline thing. Um, and as someone who's been the driver for our team for such a long time, I don't feel that as much.
Okay,
And I think a little bit of that is attributable to my experience level. But I do see where people are coming from on that, especially if the opposite alliance has all deep cages. You're maybe going to have a little more trouble seeing that. Trying to gauge your depth on the field, depth per depth perception is a
yeah.
huge thing in this game that you just don't even think about until you're in that setting. And then the other thing I notice is if you're on the far side and you're trying to climb, there's specific algae from the reef that you actually have to remove in order to be able to see those deep cages, um,
Okay.
which you don't know. I mean, you don't know that until you get onto the field and you have an actual setting and you realize all this stuff. So, all of that's just interesting to figure out over those first couple matches.
This is all gold, not just for me, but anyone that's going to compete in week two. If I'm going to try to get this out tomorrow so people can watch this before they start competing on Friday, because you load in for Thursday, Friday, Saturdays is tomorrow, right? You don't compete until like 11 o'clock on Saturday, so people have plenty of time to watch this. And I'm gonna blast it out to as many people I know that are going to compete this weekend. So you're giving great pieces of advice. Let's clarify one thing. When you say the algae has to be removed, are you talking about the last corner or the last face of the reef towards the barge? Is that middle ball that you're talking, that middle algae that you're talking about that sits there?
Yeah, so I mean it'll vary based on, if you're a 7 foot driver, you may not even think about the algae that's there. But yeah, right on the backside of the reef, that one algae, if you're on a certain driver station, it makes it really difficult to align for a deep cage climb.
Okay,
So that's the number one thing that we struggled with in a couple matches when we tried lining up because we don't have currently the best alignment mechanism on our robot.
sure.
So if you're a team like that, definitely recommend figuring out a way to pluck that algae out immediately.
I
That's
have the
the number one thing.
perfect solution. I have the perfect solution for this, and I feel so good right now. We have a middle auton that lines up to go to the middle, and it places a coil on four and immediately removes that algae and puts it in the processor. So I will make sure that we run that as many times as possible just to have that sight line. So I'm assuming if you're in if you're on I can't remember the red and blue, but the furthest driver station from the climbing is what you're talking about. So it's
Yep.
that direct line, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but that's a great auton to have. I never actually even saw that at Ferndale, but it would be super valuable in retrospect.
Yeah, I can't wait to I'm gonna text my coders right after this. They're not sleeping because tomorrow when no one sleeps the night before.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna say, good job, guys. You did it today. So what other pieces of advice do you have, Henry? I'm sure there's a bunch of them, right? So just think of things that you wish you knew before you went to that event. How can you help drive teams, drive coaches like myself, look for things? What took a lot of time, a lot more time? Cycle times is really precious. What other things can you help us with?
Okay. The number one thing that we struggled with during playoffs was the fact that when we went for algae placements in the net, a lot of times they would bounce out.
Okay.
And a lot of that had to do with the fact that we were almost forcing the ball into the net, which made it hit the bottom support. And that's a lot more bouncy than just the actual cloth net that they have out there on the field. And, we had never tested for that. We just never even figured that would be a factor. But it turns out it was, and we were lucky that we won um, so many of our matches. But our final match before we made it to finals was decided by a point, and um, we were definitely crossing our fingers because we missed a few of those shots,
Sure.
thanks to those algae bouncing out. Um, the other things I would say is a lot of teams are gonna try and play defense when they go and break during a match or something's not working, because that happens with robots.
Hmm.
Uh, Avoid penalties at all costs. Um, and that sounds so simple and like anyone could do it. But it's not as simple when you get to that other side and you're just doing anything to try and limit those points. Um, the best thing you can do would honestly just be block off the most popular human player station.
Okay.
Because once that's blocked off, and they can't get as many coral at once, hopefully it ends up being um, three robots fighting for one human player station, and then things get clogged. It's a lot slower on their side, and you're leaving your side with more room to breathe
Hmm.
rather than just having a dead robot over there.
That
Um,
makes total sense. Makes total sense. Especially, and I saw a lot of what you just said. I saw a lot of robots get a little antsy. They broke. They ran to the other side, went into, plan B and played defense. But then no one's practiced defense. So they kept hitting, a robot's bumper that just went into the protective area around the reef and just flags left and right. So that's great advice. Great advice, Henry. So here's another one I got for you. I got so many questions about this, and we'll get to
oh, good.
sponsorships from LTU and all that stuff. What about the congestion on your side when you guys are actively placing coral? Did your alliance have a game plan before? And not just in playoffs, I'm just talking about in quals. Did you guys actively talk about what the pattern of would be to do that? Because you said you had some high power teams, Robo Jackets, Bees, good teams. So did you guys talk about that before your matches?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things on our team that we've been doing the past few years is drawing out lanes on a clipboard that we have that maps out the whole field. But basically, we have these lanes, and they're just saying, like, generally speaking, you're supposed to have your robot stick to this area. So, if you've got a team that takes a little longer to load their robot at the Coral Station, and then you have two other teams that are going to be really efficient at that. You're of course going to want to put the two fast loading robots on the same human player station, so that way, nothing's ever clogged, no one's ever waiting. But a lot of it actually is going to come down to the human players themselves being able to work with so many different intakes. Because we went in thinking that everyone was going to have a super wide intake, super easy to use. Um, but before each match, we were almost having to train our own human player on how to work with other people's robots because there's just so many different um, intake designs out there that you're not aware of. Um, and then having a game plan when you've got defense is going to be a huge factor to make sure that things don't get clogged up. And whether that's, making sure that you've just got everyone being as quick at the human player station as possible, or if it's having a pure algae bot when there's defense, whatever that looks like is obviously going to work best for your alliance, but having that game plan is essential.
Another thing, a bunch of other drive coaches, because we talk, right? And I was talking to Q Branch's drive coach, and we were texting back and forth. And I said, "What did you see?" They actually went to Toronto. They went to Canada. I think it was on the Ontario thing. And he was saying, the first thing we had a robot do was take all the algae out, right? And I know I saw a lot of teams that did do that, and I was quite curious that a robot would just do that automatically when you could go grab a piece of coral, put it on, and then take an algae out, because at least then you're scoring as you're taking something out, because all they were doing is taking the algae out. It's not like they were taking the algae and going put in the processor. They were just kicking them out. And then you got balls all over the place too, right? So my first question is to you, was there a lot of cooperation at your event? Were both alliances putting the balls in the processor, or is it one over the other? That was the big thing this year because that brings down that threshold for coral scoring, right? Did you see a lot of that at your event?
Not particularly.
Okay.
And a lot of that came down to actually the fact that in speaking with a lot of those teams we were with, there were just very few robots who were comfortable with doing processor or uh, who thought it was valuable enough. And then, a lot of your matches may end up being, even if we have that lower requirement, you still feel like you're not going to be able to make that ranking point. So
Okay.
the processor uh, in a lot of matches was almost obsolete,
Okay.
unless you had a robot place one in the last 2 seconds, so that way the human player couldn't actually get that shot
Oh,
off.
that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
That was a very unique strategy I saw from a couple teams, but still like very very rare stuff. So not much processor prioritization.
Okay. Okay. I'm just curious because I told you we trained that Auton to do middle, so we put one right in the processor out of the get-go. So we're trying to maximize, like, if we were with you guys and you guys want to do left auton and say the bees want to do right auton, we don't want to interrupt you guys. So that's why we did that. Place the coral, grab the LG, and go put it in the processor. So we're not interrupting your autons, right? Because you really don't never want to do that. You never want to interrupt a 3 or 4 piece auton just to maximize scoring. Um, so let's talk about climbing, right? I watched a lot of matches, and there were people that just didn't even try to climb. They want to maximize coral pieces and scoring over the climb because one, it's so congested. Two, I think a lot of teams um, overestimated how easy it is to do, meaning that they thought it was really easy to do a deep climb, and it's not because you need to line up, right? So, did you see a lot of teams that were just say, I'll get the 2 points at the end just by crossing the line. I'm just gonna continue to put the coral pieces on?
Yeah, we actually ran into kind of that trap of thinking like, oh, we've got X team who's gonna go ahead and climb, and then we've got the other team or ourselves, and we'll just park at the end. And I would say that's a dangerous thing to do because
Okay,
relying on others is always a risk. Not that
sure.
you can't trust people, but I mean, quite frankly, I wouldn't have trusted our climb from this past week one, we weren't consistent, and if we weren't consistent, other people weren't. Um, so I would say if you have two teams that can do a deep climb, and you don't think you're going to be able to get the coral ranking point, do the deep climbs, do
Okay,
two, and just prioritize the ranking point because ultimately, I mean, it's pointless to say like, oh, but we got close to a ranking point as to saying we actually did get a ranking point and now we're, one step closer to actually picking during a
sure.
competition. Uh,
Sure, but if you're in, I'll play devil's advocate to what you just said. Okay, if you can continue to score coral, and you may not get the ranking point, but you can get the win because you keep going doing coral. It's all about the win, right?
oh yeah,
Wins the maximized. You could get. I'd rather get three ranking points and miss the one for the climb, uh, and and the coral, but still win and get three ranking points. Three's the magic number. I like to get three, right?
of
Just because
course.
we've done it for so many years that now we have six. It's kind of blowing people's minds. But keep it the KISS method, right? Keep it simple, silly. Make sure you get the three ranking points. It's all about getting that win first. At least from my perspective, that's the way I think. So I
Yeah,
go ahead.
I totally agree with that. I mean, you've got to maximize the rank you can get. Because some competitions you get lucky and you um end up in a position to pick, and it ends up working out really well for you. You make a deep run in the playoffs, you win the
Sure.
competition, that type of thing. Um, and the opposite can happen. If you don't prioritize those wins and those ranking points, you end up in a position where you're not picking and maybe you're not doing well in playoffs. Like
Sure.
these are important things to consider. So I totally agree with you on that.
Okay. What else can I ask you? How was the new selection process when you were there? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it made things a little bit easier? Was it a little more confusing? Did you have anyone that declined at the
No,
end?
no declines, which was really nice because in 2022, at the Hills girls comp, we actually had eight declines in a row for
Okay.
our team because we ranked first, and it was a whole thing. Anyways, um, no declines, thankfully. So I was really happy about that. The faster process. It seems like it'll be a factor on the field at some point, but for us it wasn't,
Okay.
because we had done our scouting prior to then. We had our data ready to go, and you do have a pretty decent break, especially if you're one of the earlier final matches of the competition. Um, so you get the decent enough break that you can figure out who you're going to pick.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say good on first for making alliance selection a lot shorter.
Yeah.
It's just a lot easier for, especially if you're on drive team, making sure you're getting to lunch on time so you can eat and then get right back out on that field. I mean, that was always a concern of mine, so I appreciate the rule.
Not that I advise this, but I'm one of those that I won't eat anything while we're in comp. Um, I'm so focused as a drive coach that I forget to eat, and they'll say, Coach, you need to eat something or drink water, right? Because you don't want to get dehydrated. So they coached, have you had a Propel? I said, no, here's a Propel. Please drink it. You're so focused, right? You're focused. That's what comp's all about. You spend all that time building the robot and practicing. When you get to the comp, it's about the focus, right? So what other things, Henry, pieces of advice as a driver or on the drive team? Are there any other gotchas that you can remember from your run at Ferndale, where in your head you would say, I wish I knew that ahead of time, or we didn't think about that?
Well, real quick, I want to kind of jump back to your
Sure.
thing on not being able to drink water. And I just want to put this out there because I know there's probably other people who are like, oh, I do the same thing at comps. Um, 2 years back, we had an operator for our team. And he didn't drink water for the entire day. And we got to playoffs, and all of a sudden he has a terrible nosebleed
Oh,
because of it, and he missed all of our playoff matches. So, that's just one of the things,
sure.
like it if you can drink the water and you're remembering it, which there will be times where you forget, but if you can drink the water just for your own safety. Uh, but in terms of things for Ferndale, you said during the playoffs
No,
or
just
just
in
in
your run,
general?
just in your run as the driver, as the team captain, was there anything in a match where you said, "Man, we didn't think about that." Because there's always so much strategy involved that there's always sometimes the game changes as the season happens, right? We're just going into week 2, so it's pretty new to everyone. Out of the 40 teams that are at St. Joe with my team, there's only 3 that had played. One's from Ferndale and 2 from Battle Creek, so there are only 3 teams that have played. So you got everyone else that's going to be kind of new, right? They're kind of try to figure things out through the weekend. But there's always things where, man, we didn't think about that, or a strategy where, like removing the algae. You had a good point. The algae blocked that sight line. So what are there any other those things that you guys made a note of during it and said, man, we got to remember the next match, this happened. We don't want that to happen.
Uh,
How about coral getting stuck in your robot? Did that happen?
oh my gosh, yes. We had a terrible little slot right at the front of our robot. It was the perfect size for one coral to
Okay.
fit in. Um, and we got burned by that a few times. Once we got it stuck, you can only do algae at that point. You can't do ground pickup. It was annoying. It was difficult, and you'd pick up another coral. That's a penalty. So if you have a way to fix that, or if there's like a makeshift thing that's gonna look ugly, make your robot look ugly. Uh, End of last season, we put this hideous looking net on our robot to make sure notes wouldn't get stuck on top of it, and it saved us. It saved us at a couple points. So I'm all for making the robot look a little more ugly to prioritize its functionality. You can buff that out by states.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Well, you got to make states first. So everyone's trying to make
Right.
states first, right? What about, and you kind of brought it up, right? You said that the human player is really important because they have to know how to put coral in. I saw, over my 6 hours of watching things, I saw um, that the some of the human players wouldn't even pay attention to what's going on in the field. Like they're not looking down. You're on the coral station, and they go look like this, and by the time they look down, the robot's there, and they go throw it, and it miss. Right? I saw a lot of coral on the ground, and for teams that don't have ground intake on this side. We're going from the station, right? That it would jam things up and then people would have to swipe stuff out of the way so they can get right up on so that you can get your thing. So that's what you brought up, right? That's really important for the human player.
Yeah, no, that's super important. Make sure that your human player just knows like you've got an important job out the field. A lot of people, especially in years past, for some reason have like put a lower marker for some reason on the position of human player, which I've never understood. It's a huge important job. Um, but yeah, a lot of people sometimes just don't think as much of human player because it's not the title of coach or
I
driver
know.
or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, make sure they know like, hey, you're valuable. We need you here, but we need you here in the match, and we need you to be paying attention.
Yeah.
Um, I know I was watching a couple matches, I think of Milford or something, maybe Kettering. But even at like the processor, there would be human players that just let all the algae stack up. And then at some point, I even saw an actual referee come and tell one of them, like, hey, you can throw these up there. But it's one of those things, like, if you're not paying attention, if you don't know the rules, you don't know what to do.
You're right.
Uh,
Right.
so
I
that
had
was.
sorry. I have a I have a lot of respect for human players, like you do. I don't know if you were around because I think this was before you played, but we had Steamworks, right? And Steamworks, you had actual, the people, the human players up inside that. Those poor people were
Oh,
lifted and they were front center of everyone. And if you didn't get that gear and up and on and spinning, oh, those poor people. I feel so bad for that game for them because
yeah.
there was so much pressure on them. So I know tears, literal tears for those people.
Yeah, my sisters both did robotics, and my oldest was in the Steamwork season, and she remembers having yelled at a human player one time while on the field by accident, but
Yeah, it happens. People
it
get, I mean, we get excited. It's all about excitement. It's not anything not gracious professionalism, but sometimes in the moment you forget because you're focused. You want to, win the
right.
match and so on and so forth. Any other pieces of advice? What did you do when someone came in? Did you have someone come play defense on you,
We
Henry?
did, yeah. So two things. First thing is not related to defense, actually. It's if you're running a lot of cameras on the field, just make sure that when you're placing coral, you're only running the ones facing the reef because that actually moves around on the field from robots hitting it so hard.
Okay.
And
The
some of
Reef
that
does?
will,
The Reef
yes,
does?
the
Oh,
reef physically moves
interesting.
around the field. And a lot of that actually has to do with the defense because you're trying to get away from it so fast that you're uncoordinated.
Okay.
And that's the number one thing that I see with drivers is they just don't know how to deal with it.
Okay.
If you are being defended against, that is not the end of the world. It is a minor setback. I'll give you that. But um, if you say before a match like, hey, we're gonna go here at this human player station, and that's how we're gonna get all of our coral, go to the other one.
Okay.
Because 9 times out of 10, the robot isn't gonna follow you. And if they do, you should hopefully be getting out of the human player station before they can even lay a hit on you.
Right. Right.
Um, in terms of actually playing defense, I think I mentioned it earlier, sit in front of that station because there will be teams who don't know how to react to it.
Good.
Um,
Good advice, Henry.
so if
I
everyone watches this video, then it is going to be really terrible to follow any of the advice I give. But hopefully, for the sake of competition, that only ends up being about half.
Well, I never thought about the coral, or I'm sorry, the reef moving. I wonder if First is going to address that because it throws things off, especially if people do like automated deliveries, right? Because are making sure that you're hitting the same spot every time. So it'd be very interesting to see if they make some type of modification to make sure those don't move. I know just the practice ones are huge and they're heavy, so I can only imagine how heavy the other ones are.
Oh yeah.
So it's very interesting, Henry. Okay, we've talked. Thank you for all the pieces of advice.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to cover the team a little bit, right? Tell me, we're gonna go back, if you believe it, about 8 weeks ago, 9 weeks ago, when we were kickoff. I know that you were with the kickoff with LTU, right? Because you guys are sponsored by LTU. How
Yeah.
was it sitting in a movie theater, eating popcorn, drinking pop, and watching a kickoff? Was that kind of cool?
That was pretty sweet, I gotta say. Like the whole environment was just well done. Um, I I love snacks, so always happy about that. But we had a great turnout from our team, and I didn't hear a single bad thing about it. Everyone just liked getting to be in there. I know uh, some people got to meet other teams a
Yep.
little bit. Uh, But having like the big screen available, that was a really cool environment. And then LTU always does the raffle, which really gets people going, gets everyone kind of amped up a little bit, which is always a little fun. So that was cool to see.
I'm glad. I know you guys have been sponsored by LTU for a couple years now, so I'm glad that that's a building relationship between you. And I love how LTU does. They don't sponsor one team; they sponsor a bunch of teams, which is great. So you can never have too much money on your teams, right? Especially if
Oh my
you
gosh.
one of the newer teams that need that money. So before I hit the record button, right? Because we do like a pre-gaming or whatever you want to call it, our Thursday night load in before we get to the record button. You talked about and you messaged me yesterday saying you got sick, right? And you said that it's been going through your team. So I think we have to do a public service announcement that if you're sick, don't be around the other team members, right?
Yeah, if you're sick and even if you feel good, I mean, take an extra day. Um, the thing we do on our team, we started this right after COVID ended. If you're on drive team or pit team, we are going to tell you put on a mask the week before comp
Ah,
because there is
interesting.
no way we're going to have you get sick right before we absolutely can't ride without you. Uh, and that's how we avoid situations where people are frantic and there's just a ton going on and not a lot of good answers for it.
Sure, sure.
Um, so yeah, if you're sick, wait until you're healthy. If you're feeling good, even a day or two after your sickness, still mask up, make sure you're protecting others, protecting yourself.
Hmm.
Because the last thing you want to do is spread it to your entire team or get it from your entire team.
Right,
And
right.
it really is going around.
It
I'm
is.
homesick. My technician is homesick. One of our impact presenters is homesick. So everyone is getting it, and you gotta be aware.
Yes. And that leads back into making sure you eat, make sure you drink your water, make sure you're getting sleep, right? And at least you guys got sick after the comp and not before the comp. So, respect the body and because you're going to get sick. Everyone's going to get sick during the season. I got it 2 weeks ago. It wiped me out I couldn't even podcast. I couldn't talk, right? You have to podcast and talk at the same time. But yeah, it's weird. This year is really weird that a lot of people are coming down with it and it's just like dropping like flies. And make sure you have a secondary drive team.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, that's one of the things we talked about is when this is my second time being sick in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So la last week, right before comp, I was sick, and I was like texting people, "Hey, make sure this person and this person are in the room, and make sure they know the controls. Make sure they know what they're doing, because you never know who's next."
Well, Henry, with that, I'm going to thank you for coming on board tonight, especially as you're recovering, like you said. And before we go, we're going to have you announce who you are again, and then how we can follow the HackBots. So, can you tell us again who you are and how we follow the HackBots?
Yeah, I'm Henry Francis, captain of 3414 HackBots. I'm a fourth year senior, and my cat is in the background yelling at me. Uh, and then if you want to keep track of the HackBots, follow us. You can check out our Facebook, our Instagram, our Twitter, X, whatever you call that account, or our YouTube channel. We post regularly on all of those. So feel free to check us out on there or any of our matches on the Blue Alliance. We're looking forward to a really strong week 4 competition, hopefully.
And where's that at again?
We're going to be at Woodhaven for this next
Okay.
one.
That's a good comp. I know the team that runs that comp. They're
Oh, yeah.
my daughter might be on that team as a mentor. So I
Nice.
always hear they run a good comp. And I'll be competing week 4 too. So week 4 is going to be a pretty good week, I think. There's a lot of big events going on. I'm going to Celine. We'll have Team Rush and Team Hot. I
Wow.
bet you I guess we could I bet you Rush picks Hot. I'm just saying. I might be, looking in my crystal ball.
You know, it could be that way, but I mean, you said Celine, right?
Yeah.
That one, I mean, hot, got to the finals, but they had some tough competition
They did. They did.
up against, I think it was Bedford.
Yep.
So, anything can happen, really.
That's true. That's true. There's a lot of luck when it comes to events that
Oh, yeah.
people don't realize that no matter how good a team is, there's always a little bit of luck.
Oh, yeah.
So, well, Henry, we hope you recover fast. We wish the HackBots continued success this season. I know how close it is to get to that winning thing, and it's right there, but that means that you'll change things, you'll improve things. And thank you, on behalf of my team and me as a drive coach, all the advice for week 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Always appreciated.